Hello, everyone, and welcome to the August 21st edition of the Decaturish.com Twitch Show. I'm your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. Today, we are going to be talking about securing your vote for the November 3rd general election. We're going to discuss what you need to do to get your ballot and what you need to do to make sure your ballot gets counted this year. And joining us, we have a great panel for you today. We have the State Director of All Voting is Local, Aklima Kondoker. Aklima, how are you?
Well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We have my friend Susanna Scott, who is president of the Georgia League of Women Voters. Susanna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Cannot complain. We have Anna Dennis, executive director of Common Cause Georgia. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And we have my friend Gabriel Sterling, who is with the Georgia Secretary of State's office. Gabriel, how are you?
Good to see it.
Great. Thank you for joining us. So the way this works is we're going to just kind of launch into our discussion. If you have questions, go on ahead and create yourself a Twitch account. Give us a follow. Get into our chat there and ask us a question. We'll be glad to answer it. So I want to hear a little bit about each of your respective organizations really quick. So Clema, can we start with you? Tell us a little bit about what your organization is and what it does, so for the benefit of our viewers.
Sure. All Voting is Local is a national nonprofit organization. It is a campaign that is housed at the Leadership Conference for Civil and Human Rights. And our main focus at All Voting is Local is to ensure that more people can gain access to the ballot. So that means reducing discriminatory barriers to the ballot to make sure that more people can vote and vote successfully. That's all that we're here to do here. And we do it with our partners. We do it through working with the Secretary of State's office and through listening to our voters and finding the best solutions to make sure that everybody can vote successfully.
Great, thank you. Susanna Scott, some people might be familiar with the League of Women Voters, some might not. Why don't you tell us what the League of Women Voters is and does?
So, League of Women Voters is also a nonprofit. We have a national league and then state and local leagues. And I'm president of the state league here in Georgia. And our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. So we're all about making sure voters understand how to vote, with the process for voting, are able to get information about candidates so they can make an informed decision, and then making sure that the instruments of government are actually working the way they're supposed to so that people can exercise their rights to vote and have their voice heard.
Great, thank you for explaining that. And Anna Dennis, you're with Common Cause Georgia, so tell us a little bit about that organization and what that organization does.
Yeah, so Common Cause Georgia, we are also a nonpartisan nonprofit organization, and we work with our coalition partners, and we also work with election officials and the Secretary of State's office to make sure that voters have information about what different barriers are out there, how can they actually be able to get their ballot counted, and how do they get good voter information out there and voter security measures. So that's a little bit of what we do.
Awesome, thank you so much. And Gabriel Sterling, for people who don't know, what is the Secretary of State's office in charge of, and what do they handle, specifically as it pertains to elections?
That is a much misunderstood situation. We have, throughout the state of Georgia, essentially a shared services model for delivering elections. What the state does is we help maintain the voter registration system, we provide the equipment, and the state election board, which isn't the Secretary of State's office, but the Secretary of State is the chairman of, sets a lot of the rules to sort of put muscle and tone to the actual laws to execute elections. As an example, like we just expanded the emergency rule to allow for drop boxes to go through the entire election cycle now. We allowed for early scanning of ballots. Those kind of things come out of the SCB. And then we work with the county elections officials directly to train them, for them to train the poll workers. And this year, we've really stepped up a lot in terms of getting poll workers in the lieu of the COVID situation. We set up a portal, and as of today, working with our partners, especially the ACLU and the Metro Chamber of Commerce, we've already given over 6,000 names to counties for people to sign up as poll workers.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving us that information. I want to let everybody know that we are largely dependent upon my own power supply here, and the sky is really scary. So there is an outside chance that we are going to lose power. We're going to cross our fingers and hope we can get through this without that happening. But if that happens, we'll try to figure it out. We'll get it back online or reschedule or whatever. So the reason I brought this crew together to talk about this is we've been reading a lot of things in the news about attempts to curtail mail-in voting. The president's been talking a lot about mail-in voting, claiming that it's impossible to have a fair election with mail-in voting. And so a lot of us are concerned about what the best way would be to, one, make sure you get your ballot, and two, once you get it and fill it out, what's the best way to make sure you get it to an election official. And so let's take that first topic first. What is going to be the best way to get your ballot? And I'll let whoever wants to take that start. Susanna?
So you can go to the Secretary of State's website right now and download a copy of the absentee ballot application form and fill that out, and you can mail it or email it to your local Board of Elections. And the Secretary of State's My Voter page is super helpful in that regard. They have the email addresses and the physical addresses of every county elections office in the state. So no matter where you are, you can find that information on the Secretary of State's website. And so just send in the application is the very first step.
Akleema or Anna, do either of you have any advice for maybe people who have relatives that don't have access to the internet and can't access these services? How can they make sure that their relatives and people that they care about get access to their absentee ballots this year?
Sure.
I think if you want to.
No. Go ahead.
No. Let's go first. A good way of making sure, I don't know if you all can, my building is on a emergency route. So it's that time of day where emergencies happen.
It's live TV.
But one good way of doing that is actually helping your relatives acquire their ballot by walking them through the Secretary of State's website. With our coalition that we work with in Georgia, we also have a site that we run called georgiavotes.com. And they can also go there to find out information of how you can request your absentee ballot by downloading the application. As citizens, we can always print our ballots out, print our application ballot out, and send it in to the Secretary of State's, and also send it into our county boards of elections. So I think those are some good ways of just getting started, of making sure that you can get your absentee ballot application in.
Akleema, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I just want to say a big agree to what everybody said. I want to promote that Secretary of State's website. So please visit my voter page because it gives you all of the information that you need to know. So visit it. It's www.mvp.sos.ga.gov. And that is where you can locate your absentee ballot information. Now, if you don't have a printer, you don't know somebody with a printer, you can also reach out to your local county elections office. And you can find that information at that website that I just referenced, where you can reach out to your county office and ask them directly whether you can just go in person and just retrieve it that way. And then you can also figure out how you can send it back. The earliest time that the election office can begin sending absentee ballots is on September 15th. So it's critically important that anybody that is interested in using our vote by mail system, using absentee voting, that they request their absentee ballot application right now, so that way they could send it back, receive that absentee ballot, fill it out, send it back again so their vote can count. So folks can send their applications back by first checking with the county office, figure out what their favored method is to receive that. Typically it's by email. Some counties can receive some information through text, but it's important to check with them first. Of course, in person is an option. So a person can always bring their application in person. They can always mail it in as well. And again, it's very important that folks get out there and request their absentee ballot applications right away so that they can allow for enough time to receive that ballot and then send it back in.
Gabriel, do you have anything you want to add to this part of the discussion?
Several things. First, everything they said is absolutely right as the current system is built. And the sooner they do it, the better off it is. Because what happens for a lot of these, especially smaller counties, it's really interesting. The very large counties have problem processing because of the sheer volume, and the small counties have a problem because they just don't have the resources to get people to it. So the sooner people can submit their absentee ballot requests, the better it is for everybody to make sure they can get their ballot in a timely manner. But what's really going to blow your minds now is that next week, it looks like, fingers crossed, we're in testing right now. We're going to be launching an absentee ballot portal where all you have to do is put in your, for most of our voters, this will work. Your first name, your last name, your, driver's license number, date of birth, and county. And that way you can get into the system and we say, we know this is you. You put in where you want your ballot to go, and it'll automatically populate to the county's dashboard, and they can just click. So it makes processing a lot easier. And then this is going to be really great. If you put your email address in, you'll get an automatic confirmation that your request has been received. And then when the county accepts it into the dashboard, you can go to the MVP site and say, hey, the request has been accepted. And then the issue date will be put on, so you'll see the issue date. And another item we're working on right now that's not ready to launch yet, because, we're drinking water from a fire hose. We're trying to get a ballot tracking system in that, at a minimum, if you put in your cell phone and your email, you'll get an email or a text saying your ballot mailed, your ballot's been received, your ballot has been accepted. So all those things, so you can have that peace of mind knowing your ballot has gotten to the county and been processed properly and appropriately. Because what happened last time, the crush of the popularity, and when the secretary sent out the 6.9 million absentee ballot requests, especially in Fulton County, unfortunately, we believe probably there's a couple thousands potentially of people who never had their request processed. And it was just, that's part of the reason we're building this portal, because that takes away a lot of the stuff. Even if it was processed, oftentimes it went to the wrong address because those workers are overwhelmed. They're doing the easiest thing they can to get through it. So by developing this portal, we're taking as much of the human error out of it as we can and putting as much transparency in it as possible.
So let's say I request an absentee ballot, and for whatever reason, I don't get it. It's not delivered in the mail. Whatever happens, the Raven doesn't show up and drop it on my doorstep. What can I still then go and vote early? Am I allowed to do that? Even though, and how does that work?
So I would recommend, if you've applied, checking the My Voter page website to see if it's been received. If you apply this week, and when early voting starts, and is it October 5th?
October 12th.
October 12th.
30th.
So, and you haven't received it by October 12th, check the My Voter page website and see if it's even been processed. Because if it hasn't, then yes, you can go and vote early, no problems. If it has, there's a couple, you can still go and vote early. If you haven't received it, but it's been processed and sent out, you can still go vote in person. And you just you're going to have to walk through that process with the poll workers to let them know that you didn't receive it and you want to vote in person.
My suggestion to Suzanne's point, do that on the early voting time, because doing it on election day is a friggin' nightmare. Because you have thousands of polling locations open, and the way it's set up right now, although we're in some of the big counties, hopefully change this, they have to call headquarters and say, hey, I've got this person here. Has their vote been received? And if you have 30 people calling one or two numbers at one time, they get a busy signal, then they got to wait. And so we have reports been waiting 45 minutes because of that. And oftentimes it wasn't because they didn't receive it. They just chose to change their mind. They thought COVID was really bad. And then I'm going to go vote in person, because historically in Georgia, we are a vote in person state. So if that does happen to you, the recommendation for me, following Susanna's statement, is go do the early voting thing. In fact, do it the first week of early voting. And in fact, if you like voting in person, really do it the first week of early voting, because that's our most underutilized resource. There shouldn't be lines, and we need to spread the people out as much as we can, so that on election day, part of our plan for November is get people to use the pre-election day options. Early voting has historically been the most popular. Absentee is obviously very much increased, but if we can lower, we're thinking 2 to 2.5 million people on election day. And for perspective, we had 880,000 in June. 3 times as many people were expecting to show up, essentially. So we really need people to vote early if they can, or vote absentee. And the sooner you do these things, the better you make it on your neighbors, and the easier it'll be for your county elections officials and poll workers to do their jobs.
Gabriel, what is your office doing to get this message out to everyone? What kind of public awareness, public relations type things is your office?
There's this great thing called HAVA money, Help America Vote Act. So we will be ginning up a very large social media program, plus television advertising, radio advertising, really going to be focusing on getting people to early vote if they can in those first 2 weeks, because all y'all know who work in the election sphere and getting voters to show up, those last couple of days of early voting are worse lines than election day, because everybody's trying to get it done. And like, oh crap, I meant to do that. So we're going to shove all those people to the front of the line and do it in, starting October 12th and that week. That's going to make the rest of that stuff work better. So we're going to spend a lot of money trying to get people to do that and understand that, because a lot of people still didn't, even after sending the applications, didn't understand. We have been a no excuse absentee state since 2005. I mean, we have 3 weeks of early voting plus a mandated Saturday.
We're ahead of the curve in a lot of ways in that regard.
And you can register at the DMV, which is cool.
Yeah. Automatic registration.
Right.
That's why we now, of the people with driver's licenses, there's only like 500,000 people who aren't registered already. We're at 90% of eligible people being registered in the state. It's something y'all may not know. We're about to do an eligible but unregistered mailing to everybody who's not registered but who should be, to try to give them one more shot to register before the election. That's part of us joining the electronic registration information system so we can share data with other states. So we're spending a lot of money and time and effort to try to make sure everybody's registered.
So we just covered this, but I want to state it again because we had somebody ask, when does early in-person voting start, for the record?
October 12th.
October 12th. There you go. October
The 30th.
12th through the 30th. So if you want to do in-person early voting, we are going to have that information on Decaturish. Oh, you're welcome. We're going to have that information on Decaturish. We're going to publish that throughout. We're going to definitely do our part to make sure that people know what's going on and how they can vote and how they can cast their ballot. I have sort of a technical question. So I am able to, I live in DeKalb County, I can send an email with my absentee ballot request, and I usually send it for myself and my wife, and we can get our absentee ballots that way. If you have an elderly relative, let's say, can you do that for them? Can you email your local board of registrar with their absentee ballot application? And
you can, if it's their signature on the form, that's absolutely allowable.
Another question: can you submit an absentee ballot application at the drop boxes?
So that actually came up in today's DeKalb County Board of Elections meeting. You're not supposed to, but Erica Hamilton, who is the registrar for DeKalb County, said that if they were put into the drop boxes, they would accept them. But it's not technically what they're there for. I don't know that that's the case in every county, but in DeKalb County, they said that they would.
I think they're not going to be ignored, but let's remember, they don't have to start emptying those because, as it was pointed out earlier, we don't send them out till September 15th, really. So they're not going to be checking those boxes for a while. So I wouldn't recommend that as a way to go right now.
Yeah, so fun story. Before, I have a reporter at the DeKalb Elections Board meeting today, and at some point, somebody during the meeting said, I don't want this to get out in public. I've got good news for you. It's going to be out in public on Decaturish very soon. You should be able to check it out. Everyone will get to hear exactly what you didn't want to be heard. So congratulations.
That's called a tease, ladies and gentlemen. He's teasing you.
That's right. I am teasing you. Very much so. That's the one thing you never say in front of a reporter. That's some free advice. So we got about 8 people joining us. If you're just joining us, we have a panel of experts here who are ready and willing to take your questions about the upcoming election. They're all very knowledgeable people. If you got a question, give us a follow, put a comment. We've already had a couple of great ones. I have a question about the best way to make sure that our ballot gets to where it needs to be and is counted. Now, what I did last election, and I did this for the runoff as well, is I just went to the voter registration office on Memorial Drive. They got a drop box. I just got out and I popped it in the drop box and I left. Some people are going to want to vote by mail. Some people are going to want to, vote. Some people just love getting up and going to vote in person. I understand that. That's typically how I like. That's typically how I like to do it too. What, in your opinion, if you're not going to vote in person, let's start there. What, in your opinion, is the best way to handle this? Is it to mail it with all the stuff that we've been hearing about the post office? Or is it to just go ahead and make a point to drive to the registrar's office and put it in the drop box? Anybody? Akima, let's start with you.
I think that voters need to have every single available option for them to cast their ballots, period.
Sure.
So I think that in large part, this is a personal decision for the voter, of course. Understanding what's happening with the post office, I think all voters should keep in mind what they have to go through in order to actually vote using a mailbox. So that is an option that is still available, but folks have to think about a stamp is 55 cents now, where to get it from, to send it back, because unfortunately, that is not a paid option that is provided with the application. So they have to figure out how to pay for that stamp, where it is that they have a mailbox in their area. Depending on where they live, it may not be nearby, it may have to be a post office. So there are a few extra steps here to figure out the most effective way to deposit that application or that ballot using a mailbox, and there is a wait time there as well. The benefits to a drop box, if they are available in your community or in your county, is that you don't have to worry about postage. They should be in designated areas that are near familiar or government buildings. The guidance that we have heard is that it's best to have one drop box per 15,000 voters in a particular community, so that way all voters can access the drop box. And using that drop box, you can deposit your ballot there securely and conveniently without having to worry about postage. And we know that the poll workers, that the elections offices are going to directly collect them. So those are the differences there. When it comes to a mailbox, we know it has to go through the postal service, and that has its own delays, and that has its own back and forth communications. When it comes to using a drop box, that is a direct way of delivering your absentee ballot. So that means that that is a direct communication between you and your elections office, and you don't have to worry about postage when utilizing that as well. So it's really up to the voter what they feel most comfortable using, but we do think that if you use a mailbox, there's going to be delays because we know what we've been hearing. The Dropbox, significant, I think, advantage there because you don't have to pay for the stamp. You should have it in your community so you can access it, and that's direct communication with your election office.
Anna, you were nodding when I talked about in-person voting. I feel you. I feel the same way.
Yeah. I agree that, we should have expanded options for every type of way we want to vote. However, voting is a personal decision of how you choose to vote. And I do actually go in person during early voting. I'm usually one of those people on the first day of early voting. I'm like, yay, I'm ready to go. Me and my daughter, we go and early vote. And I do it with my family, and we go to a certain precinct that we've been going to for decades, well, since at least a little over a decade, to do early voting in Georgia. And that's like one of our family traditions, but it's also a way that I get to know who is the precinct manager and who are the poll workers and the staff there. And it's also a way that I get to talk to them and ask them, oh, what else do you need? Do you need any more help or anything? Do you need more supplies or something? So it's another way outside of me working in voter protection that I get to introduce myself to our community members who are poll workers and precinct managers. And for decades, my family has always been poll workers. So it's always our tradition to kind of go to the precincts of also where our family members are. I'm like, hey, how are you doing? So we've been doing that for decades. So I do enjoy going to early vote, and I do enjoy getting my sticker. I got two in June, the one that says I secured my vote, and the one that's had the Georgia peach. And then in the recent August runoff, me and my daughter, we went to the State Farm Arena. That's a larger facility, and we went and saw their operations, and we actually voted there, and we got our sticker there that had like the basketball on it, and she enjoyed acting like it was a teething toy.
That's adorable.
I think I love that it's a family tradition in your family, because it is in mine as well. And it's been challenging because I live with my mother, who I'm not going to say how old she is on television, but she is in the vulnerable community. So, we're not going and voting in person this cycle. And one thing I want to point out from not to steal the thunder from your reporter, Dan,
No
but one of the
worries.
things that came up in the Board of Elections meeting today was that they are going to have 21 ballot drop boxes around the county. They are looking, expect a letter from the DeKalb Board of Elections, Gabe, because they're sending a letter asking for a little bit more leeway and where to place them. I don't know that y'all are going to be able to give them any leeway there, but they're going to ask for it. And they really want to get to 30. And they want to make sure that they're in communities like in Southwest DeKalb, where they might not, they haven't really had ballot boxes there. So they want to make sure that the entire county can easily get to a ballot drop box. So that's good news coming from them today.
So, Gabe, do you want to weigh in on this question and
Yeah,
maybe?
there's a couple of things I want to get in on that one. First of all, we've been in communication with the post office, and some of the good things you're going to hear is they've lost no equipment in the state. Nothing's been changing. The letter that came to the secretary from the postmaster general, nobody in the local in North Georgia or South Georgia knew anything about. So there have been no post office boxes being taken, no equipment being moved. So for them, their operations are remaining the exact same as they've been the last couple of years. So they feel confident and they feel good. We had them on the call with our counties today. We had a statewide county call, kind of walk through all the different things of how it works. Like in DeKalb, they're doing a business reply mail for that stuff to get back in. That is treated as first-class mail, not treated as bulk mail. So that's going to make sure that stuff gets handled in the appropriate way. And it's a 3 to, I think, 7-day delivery time that they guarantee on that. It's usually faster than that in metro areas. So we feel better that our absentee programs will be handled fine in this state. And the vast majority of the issues we saw with them in June had nothing to do with the post office and everything to do with counties that just they got overwhelmed with COVID situations and didn't process them well and didn't handle the pressure of that well. As a specific example, unfortunately, was Fulton County lost a female elections worker who was over helping with the absentee program, and the person who was completely over that got
COVID as well.
That 1 week, they never were able to catch up.
I got you. Gabe, we lost you for just a second. You might want to clear the tree branch off your internet line if you can. We have a couple of questions coming in from our readers. Somebody asked what is the address of the Memorial Drive Dropbox? That has been answered, but for anybody watching, it is 4380 Memorial Drive, Suite 300 in Decatur, Georgia. That's Greater Decatur, so it's 30032. Interesting fact, you can also get compost over there by the voter registration office, so you can go vote and get some compost for your garden. The county will give it to you for free, and I imagine it's DeKalb County compost, so hey, it's probably pretty good. Also, another question. How long does it take for the status of your absentee ballot to be updated on the state's My Voter page? And I think Gabe would probably
How that works essentially is that the county has to process it. And once they process it overnight, it goes automatically to my voter page. So if it hasn't changed on my voter page, the county hasn't processed it yet. It's an automatic system. So it's really the human processing things that's the normal delays you'll see on any of those.
Do you have a guesstimate as to how long that might take?
How long is a piece of string? I mean, the problem we have right now is that if you did it right now, it'll probably happen pretty quick. But as we get close to the election, how many workers do they have? How efficient are they being? Does your request get put in this stack for the worker who's going really fast, or in this stack for the person who's not? That's why doing the absentee portal will make your life a heck of a lot easier because it's going to be automatically on there, and they can quickly press a button to accept, and then it gets updated.
Akleema, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a question about that point that you made about it being up to the poll worker or the election worker rather to first obtain it and then figure out how processing it goes from there. What guidance does the Secretary of State's office provide to counties to make sure that they are promptly and timely collecting and processing the absentee ballots so that way we can have more uniformity in reporting onto the
There's uniformity right now in the rules. Okay. The problem was our rules were based on normal things, which is normal processing, which is 5% of our ballots. 50% all of a sudden makes, I have to hire a bunch of new people. Where do I put them when I social distance? I mean, that's the realities of the election administration part is make it difficult. The rules are it has to be processed within 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the rule. And then you have to give a cure period if there's an issue, if it gets rejected.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where it stands right now. Don't quote me on that particular product. I know the cure period's in 3 days, but normally it's like you process this when you get it in. And the real issue we had in one county was the emails got put to the back of the line for no apparent reason. And we kind of got stuck with that situation. So that won't happen again.
What is the state doing to help prevent from those things happening? And what's the emergency preparedness? Because we are still in the pandemic. We are still living the reality of COVID. So what is the state doing? And how can advocates and folks like us who are working in the communities, what can we do to help the engine keep going?
Spreading the applications out. Doing as many applications early as possible spreads the workload out. If we start compressing the time that they come in, that raises the workload for those county workers. And like in Fulton and DeKalb, they're taking a lot of their furloughed workers that are at home, they can't do anything, but they're still getting a check and bringing them in to do these things. So they're really ramping up. Like Fulton's bringing on 75 people to do nothing but process these absentee ballot applications. So we're working with especially the big counties, because they're the ones that have the real issues. But by adding the portal, it cuts down on the work for those workers 30-fold. They literally, instead of having to open it, compare the signatures, type in all the stuff, they now open a dashboard. This is the voter, this is the voter record, this is accepted, here's the issue date, and they're done. So I really want to encourage everybody that once the portal is open next week, if you're doing education efforts in your community, push people to the portal, because it gives them that transparency. It gives them that sense, because they're going to get an email saying that we received it. I mean, it becomes a lot smoother process. There won't be typos. There won't be issues where the poll worker picked the mailing address instead of the residential address, or the out-of-county address instead. That system will make it a lot easier. So that's the biggest thing we've invested in. And we've been a lot of these poll workers we're sending to them have also volunteered to do anything to help out. And one of the things the ACLU has done, I think you talked to other people from other communities and other activist organizations. While poll watching is great, poll working is greater. You're going to learn more. You're going to be inside the tent. You'll see what's happening. And I encourage everybody to be a poll worker. And if you can, go in and volunteer. I want to help you process ballots. If you have advocates out there who want to be in the process of these things, that would be one of the best things that can happen.
So we do have advocates that want to actually volunteer to help with the canvas. How can we funnel those volunteers over to you all? How can we better vet for folks who want to volunteer for programs like that? What do you need from us to help streamline?
My best suggestion is we are basically a funnel that then gives stuff to counties for our poll worker thing. If you go to securevotega.com, the first thing that pops up is to be a poll worker. I would suggest if you have a person who lives in a county, send them straight to their county with a specific thing saying, they're getting overwhelmed lots of poll worker asks, but they're not getting people say, hey, I want to help you with the absentee process. Hey, I want to help you with absentee counting, because that's another big thing they're going to have to do. And we changed that rule to allow for the 2 weeks of early scanning. They need sworn workers, so that you have to be trained, you have to be sworn in. And, Suzanne's shaking her head. She knows this is not like you just show up and do it. There's a timeline. So the earlier people want to get involved, the better off the counties will know the deployment of people that they need to do and how best to use them.
And so I just want to, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
I just wanted to just kind of follow up as well to say that, our state table also is doing poll worker recruitment. So at GA Votes, we are actively doing this, and we're working in these communities. And I'm very curious about this absentee ballot request tool. I was wondering if there's a way that perhaps advocates that are interested in looking at the tool can review it first before it goes live and make suggestions, because I don't know.
We have a couple of advocates we're working with. That's not my wheelhouse.
Okay.
But it's going to be, make it live, we can make tweaks. But this is sort of a version 1.0 to get it out. Mm-hmm. And it will be sort of a 1.1, 1.2 as we move along.
Got it. And you had mentioned before that a person would have to put their driver's license number in. Does it accept or the state ID? Are other forms of government issued ID considered using that tool, or must you have those numbers?
You must have one of those two. If you can't, it'll take you to the link to download the form. It'll be the PDF. You can fill it in on that one, because the only way we can identify you with our current our live records is through the driver's license number or your state ID. It's exactly how we have our online voter registration set up. We identify you because we have all this other information. This is you. It's hard to have that information for somebody else. And that's our identifying use.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So I think if you need them, you've got 3 volunteers to be fresh sets of eyes to check out the portal. So
and I'm an elections dork, so I love elections.
We all are.
You and Gabe should talk. If you're
and
into,
then the other question I had, though, is in terms of, you mentioned typos and the less chance of that happening. But if a typo happens when you're filling out the portal, what's going to be the process to address that that situation so that people don't get kicked out?
If a typo, if a user puts in an address, there's no real way for us to know that it's real, that it's correct or not. So for the most part, what we've seen is what normally happens. I said typo. That was probably not the right thing. In our system, there's a mailing address for some voters, there's a residential address for everybody, and then there's the out of county or out of state. And what will happen is usually what we saw was poll workers potentially picking the wrong one. And that's really what happened more than this. So this is the user doing it, so they really can't pick their own wrong address, fortunately.
Well, and I'm thinking actually more like if I have a hyphenated last name and I forget the hyphen, is the portal going to kick that out because it's not an exact match, or is there going to, what are the situations there?
First name, last name, driver's license, and I think what it's really going to look for is first letter, last letter, and then the driver's license number and date of birth. Those are the kind of items that we know will be, it'll make it findable, because it's really what we look at now is first letter, last letter on some of those things. And if you try 3 times and doesn't do it, and for whatever reason it doesn't match up, it'll then again take you to the printable form and you can still submit that.
Gabe, is the portal to get people their absentee ballot application, or is it to get them their absentee ballot?
Ballot.
Okay.
Their actual ballot.
So when I fill out my form to get the absentee ballot, there's a signature portion of that. And the reason I bring this up is they actually kicked my wife's back the first time because she didn't put her own, she used the she filled it out with Google PDF or whatever it is, and they have like their own signature file. So she thought, okay, that'll work, and they kicked it back because it didn't match her signature. How does your website address that issue?
We don't have a signature match for this. Your match is the name and your driver's license. Like I said, just like the online voter registration.
I got you.
Remember, on your driver's license, there's a signature. You know your driver's license number.
Right.
We know this is you, so all the stuff matches.
Cool. All right. Well, that's good to know. Do y'all have any other questions for Gabe on this topic before we move along?
I think the only question I would have, I think you may have already addressed it though, so thank you. Is there ever an instance where somebody could be denied or rejected using the absentee portal, or does it automatically just link you to that other page for you to have the printable fillable PDF?
You will not get rejected at the portal level. It'll just say, okay, we can't find your record here. Sorry about that. Here's the paper form for you to send in, or the PDF, you can fill it out. And the good part about that one is you can save it as a PDF. You don't even need a printer. You can do it, save it as a PDF, and then email that to your county registrar.
So you won't need
sign it though. Damn it.
Well, you need a signature though?
I just realized that. I'm sorry, I just said it out loud. So yeah, you got to sign it. My apologies. I forgot. I'm so used to my new portal I'm in love with that I don't think about those kind of things anymore. So
wait, okay. so clarify what we just said. There was a lot of overlap.
Sorry, they can, if you put the thing in and you try it 3 times and doesn't match, you'll say, we're sorry, here's the link to the downloadable PDF thing. Fill it out. You do have to print it, sign it, and then either scan it, take a picture of it, mail it. I guess you could put it in Dropbox. I wouldn't recommend it. So those are your options on that. And again, this is a tool to catch 95% of the people, knowing that we're not going to catch 100% because it's impossible to have any tool that catches 100%. But we're trying to take a lot of load off the counties because the counties begged us, don't send out applications again because we got crushed last time we'll get this demolished this time. People would be disenfranchised left and right. That's why we went this route instead of doing the other route.
So if you're just joining us, this is the Decaturish.com Twitch Show. I'm your host, editor, and publisher Dan Wisenhunt. Our topic today is voting. How to secure your vote, how to make sure your vote is cast in this election. Our guests are the State Director of All Voting is Local, Aklima Kondoker, Executive Director of Common Cause Georgia, Anna Dennis, Susanna Scott, President of the Georgia League of Women Voters, and Gabriel Sterling with the Georgia Secretary of State's office. If you have a question, create a Twitch account, drop into our comments section and ask. We've had some good ones already. One thing that came up in the last, I think it was the primary election, was the sensitivity of the machines. And I want to preface this by saying, for the love of God, anybody that is listening to this, when you fill out your ballot, please, for the love of God, bubble in the whole circle on your choice. Like, fill the whole damn thing in with a pencil or a pen or whatever. Don't make an X. Don't circle it. Don't
make it with a pen.
With a pen.
Black or blue ink.
Black or blue. Oh, no pencils.
Yes.
Sorry. Black or blue ink. For the love of God, do that, because and what'll happen is you've got people who will do that on the top half of the ballot, and they get down to the bottom, and they're just like, this guy, and they do a check or something. So tell your grandma, tell your uncle, tell everybody who's filling this thing out, bubble in the whole damn circle. But we know that not everybody's going to follow the instructions. Gabriel, what is the guidance that elections officials are being given as far as how to count those ballots? How do they? I know that they can.
We have better than guidance. We have a rule that we just passed.
Wonderful.
We moved and so part of this gets into the deep understanding of how scanners interpret information. So what we did, the original settings, and don't quote me in a court of law on this. I'm giving this as a general amount because I always get it off by 1%, and then people yell at me on Twitter. So it's like the old one was 0 to 14% is not a mark, okay? And then from like 0 to 13 not a mark, 14 to 35 is ambiguous, and anything above 35 is a mark. This is the intended human, they did that. And what the old system was, it was either a mark or it wasn't a mark. We now have this thing called adjudication in the new system, where if the computer says, I'm not sure what this guy meant to do, it brings that ballot up and you can see it. And so what we did was we ran a lot of tests after this because, again, when we bought this stuff, we weren't assuming we were going to have half the votes cast on these things. So there's a lot more focus on the other side and the rules around then. And we just kind of took the EAC certified the system at the settings that we got it at, so that's what we used. So what we did is we've now lowered it to where 0 to 10% is going to be not a mark. 10% to 20% is the ambiguous zone, and 20% and up is an obvious mark, because when we looked through it, anything that above 20% was obvious. And what you got to understand is there are other states that have lower zones for this, like Colorado, but they use a red dropout, which means the oval itself is red, which is not read by the computer. So our oval by itself is 5 to 8%. So if you lower it too much, you're going to get a lot of overvotes and unintended consequences, and somebody slightly hitting it with a pen and a stray mark will slow the system down. So we've set it from 10 to 20, and basically when you bring up the adjudication module, if the voter's intent is obvious, the adjudication team, which is it's a Republican and Democrat and third person, usually an election worker, and they all kind of decide or vote, this is what the person intended. And frankly, I've never seen an adjudication that wasn't always 3-0, 3. It's almost always obvious what the voter was intended to do. So we lowered the sensitivity somewhat, but if you lower it too much, you stop the whole system. And if you raise it too much, you're missing votes. So we're trying to find a sweet spot and understand places like Colorado and Oregon and those guys, they spent 8 years kind of just refining and doing this. We launched this whole absentee ballot program in like 6 weeks. So we are learning from this. We set that after doing a lot of testing. So 10 to 20% is the new thing. And anytime there's an adjudicatable vote on there, the entire ballot is shown, and you can change stuff on all throughout the ballot if they can see, oh, this didn't make the line, but it's obvious what that person meant.
Fill out the whole bubble, y'all, please. That is the name of that tune. Please.
That is the best thing.
Please
Yes.
get a pen, fill out the whole bubble, please, for the love of God. I want to follow up. I want to backtrack for just a minute on the absentee ballot portal that the Secretary of State's office is launching. You're going to get an email receipt. Aside from peace of mind that your ballot application has been received, what does that do for you? Like, if there's a dispute, is that something that you're going to be able to show later? Hey, I requested this and I didn't get it. What does it do anything else beyond giving you the peace of mind knowing that it's been received?
Yeah, it means basically you can call your county and say, look, people, I got the record that you got this, and you're telling me you didn't process it, so now I'm going to make you process it. And basically, it becomes evidence in the state election board case. And let me be clear, when I said we passed the rule, the state election board passed rules. The secretary didn't just make things up. There's a board, it's got Republicans and Democrats, and everybody does that. So it's really intended to be an accountability tool and give you options. The other thing that's going to be on there is the link to the MVP that a lot of people don't know exists. They can go look at their status and stuff, and that gives them that information as well. So that's what that's about. And if I can get my ballot tracking done, that will also be on there to give you the option to go ahead and put in your cell phone and email address so you can get proactively informed of where your ballot is.
So we've got about 15 minutes left. I feel like we've generally covered all the things that I wanted to cover, but I wanted to give our panel a chance to maybe ask some questions that they might have for Gabriel Sterling that maybe we didn't get to, and I'll let whoever wants to jump in there ask a question. Don't all jump in at once.
We're all like holding our breath on who's going to go first. So I'll ask mine first. I'm sorry, you just kind of jumped in there and started. So Gabriel, I have a question for you. I'm wondering, when it comes to having more paper ballots at precincts for Election Day, are you all going to have more of an allocation that's not just 10% of a voting population? Or are you going to expand that to 15 to 20 to 25% after what we saw in June with delays, extensions, some precincts not having enough ballots? So I'm wondering, what type of provisions are you all doing at the state level to make sure that counties have enough supplies in the form of paper ballots for Election Day?
Well, the rule is 10%. What we discovered, unfortunately, is some people interpreted 10% to mean 0%, which was obviously the worst possible outcome. And we're working with them all in the logistics plans. We have some specific counties that we're going to be doing some special reviews with, and they have to give us their plans on getting those deployed properly to the right place, because the emergency ballots they're precinct based. So you can't just print the ballot for your county or the districts that you have to have it. That's a precinct based thing. So they have to make sure they have all those. And one of the things that we did when we purchased the entire system for the state was every county has now been given a mobile ballot printer. And with that, they can use, the whole point of that is you'll have the 10% in that location. And let's say worse things happen. Everything goes to crap, power goes out, that floods the room. You can get the county office, and the bigger counties have multiples of these, obviously, and they can print more, and there's going to be a rover plan to make sure those get put in there. The plan is those are belt and suspenders. And one of the things that was very frustrating for us at the state level is if the people would follow the rules and do the things they're supposed to do, a lot of the stuff wouldn't have happened. And what we really discovered was by losing the institutional knowledge of our older poll workers, because the average age of a poll worker was 70. So we obviously lost a lot of those people who were, like, for their own safety and rightfully so, didn't go. It wasn't the equipment. So with any of the equipment, it was the election process that people didn't understand. And even people who did understand them somewhat, they were treating emergency ballots like provisional ballots. So they were taking it, they were putting it in the sleeves, they were signing all that stuff, when really an emergency ballot, if you have a hand-marked emergency ballot, you put that through the scanner. It goes through, it gets counted just like the BMD ballot does. So we were losing a lot of time in the process. We've been talking to the counties, doing a lot of training around this. And we're also deploying text to all of the locations on the off chance that something goes wrong goes wrong. Because essentially what happened is, of all the 50,000 pieces of equipment we had put out in the field, 14 were taken out. What happened was people put in encoders wrong or backwards or upside down, or they didn't hold the button on the UPS down for 5 seconds. So the equipment itself all did exactly what it's supposed to do if they turn it on right. And that was our bigger problem. And the paper poll books, which is the other thing we need to have, that's been a standard practice to have those in every precinct for 18 years. So nearly every county has that one down at least, but it always comes up, but it's almost always there. We're working with them to make sure they have enough ballots on the 10% rule by itself. And the other thing they have to worry about is not just 10% for a polling location. They need to have a 10% per precinct. Like in Fulton County, North Fulton Annex, there's 4 or 5 precincts there. So they have to have 10% of each type. And that's going to be thousands of ballots. And the rules around handling those to make sure you give people the right ones. So hopefully you don't have to use those, but we are working to make sure those are available, because having backup plans is what keeps voting going. Because one of the things we always tell the counties is nothing stops people from voting. If the poll pad goes down, use paper poll vote. BMD breaks down for 2 hours and the power goes out, use paper ballots. Scanner goes down, use the emergency bin. Nothing ever stops people from voting. And what happened in June is people froze. They kind of like got overwhelmed. Everybody stopped and figure this out, as opposed to be figuring it out, but let everybody keep voting. And that's the main thing we're trying to get people to understand, because this is, at the end of the day, on election day, a math problem. You have to get, if you have one scanner location and you have people going through, never going to happen. At 25 seconds, that's a pretty good flow. You're going. If you have one person vote every 25 seconds, you can only have 1,725 people vote at that location. So if 2,000 show up, you better have a plan. You better have more equipment. You better have a better scanner. You got to figure out how to get these people through there. Everything we're doing on our side is to try to shave seconds off the transactions on these things. Because you take seconds off over thousands of precincts with 2 million voters, you're saving lots of time and lowering the lines.
Aklima.
I heard 2 different things here. So I heard some great improvements, which I think are necessary and welcomed. So I love hearing about this portal dashboard that y'all are working on, and I'm excited to see when it launches next week. But I heard when we first started this conversation that the Secretary of State is the muscle and sets the tone for our elections. So I wonder, moving forward, what I've heard is voters haven't done this earlier on time. They're not filling in bubbles, and county offices didn't do this right, and it's their problem with the machine. And though I hear the Secretary of State is making improvements, what other improvements are needed right now? What were some of the failures that, or some of the misgivings that didn't work out according to plan from the Secretary of State's office that we could build on? What can we build on to improve?
Poll workers and polling locations. So like I said, Fulton's doing a very good job of adding polling locations. And they're the biggest, they got hit worse than anybody else in terms of polling locations. And poll workers, like I said, we've now got 6,000 that we've handed out the names to the counties to draw from. In fact, we got a letter from one county that says, we don't need any more. We're like, yes, you do. You're going to put these people on a waiting list. You're going to train them anyway. Because as an example, when we were putting out the text to the field text, we had on the Monday before the Tuesday runoff, we had 20 that had been trained, ready to go.
We're going to wait just a second.
So we need to have backups for them. So did y'all lose me again?
So poll workers.
Right.
I heard poll workers. I heard that y'all are taking more of an active role to get us poll workers, and that's great. I know that one of the SEB rules that was passed was absentee ballot processing, us being able to do that ahead of time. And I think that is also great. But I understood it as an option, but not a mandate. So I wondered, do you all have guidance in mind for counties on when they should begin processing absentee ballots to ensure that we don't have that sort of issue that we encountered before with late processing and issues coming up last minute?
Well, there's 2 different things of processing that we had a problem with. But our rule was about getting ready to count. So fortunately, on the old system, it scanned and tabulated as a single action. So we could never do that under our law. Under the new system, you can scan without tabulating. It's kind of like the early voting. You're scanning all the time, but you're not closing out the polls and tabulating. So we have given them that option. Every county who chose not to do that learned the lesson. And they're almost all either going to start 2 weeks before or 10 days before. But again, a lot of these counties do not have manpower, but they're smaller counties that can handle it more. It's really the big counties that have the real processing issues. Like I said, the ones in the middle are okay. It's the really tiny counties that have no resources at all And the really big counties, they're just crushed with volume. And we can't do a one size fits all. Like Fulton is the most resourced county in the world. They just got another $6.5 million grant for elections. The entire state elections budget is $5.7 million. So Fulton's going to spend $21 million of their own money, $6.5 million more of other grant money. They're getting people embedded with them. DeKalb is in a similar situation. They've had another couple of $1 million. What it comes down to oftentimes is the processes. And we're working with trying to get a logistics company to come in to kind of look at these processes, because oftentimes, why do you do it that way? Because we've always done it that way.
So then can we work on that? Can we work on making sure that these other smaller counties that don't have these robust populations and budgets have the support that they need, but also the mandated guidance? So it's not just like a principle of however you all think is right, but more targeted to, we ought to do this earlier.
Works, though. We can't just put a gun to their head and say, we're going to make you do this.
It's not a gun. It's best practices for now.
But we do that. We do that. That's SCB rules are there. We give you guidance on these county calls. We have a thing called Firefly where counties share with each other things that they're learning and seeing. And
he's frozen.
And we're going to wait just a second.
We don't see problems. We don't see counties that are smaller having these issues. Almost all the issues are exclusively in the large counties: Chatham, Fulton, DeKalb, Gwinnett, Cobb.
Well, I would say that those counties probably have more access to our ears and our eyes also, because we know that these other communities don't have the same coverage either. But I would love to work with your office so that all of us can kind of put our heads together, put our ideas together, and figure out robust solutions to help voters. I hear that your commitment is there, and I hope that your commitment continues with us and that we can figure out a way to make it work best for all of our voters.
Okay. League feels the same way. And one question I have, I know that you guys do the train the trainers when it comes to poll workers. We've got a league in Rome, Floyd, and Floyd County had some issues with the runoff election.
Oh, yeah, they totally screwed the pooch on that part.
They did. And one of our monitors went around to a few of the polling places just to get a sense of what was going on. And he was friends with one of the the poll managers in one of the locations. And she told him, we didn't get started until 10:30, but we were letting people vote. But she's been doing it for years, but she did not know to distinguish between provisional ballots and emergency ballots. So she was writing on them emergency ballot and putting them in a pile, because she didn't know what to do with them. So I'm wondering, what can the Secretary of State's office do during their train the trainer to make sure the nuances of how to treat these situations really gets down to the poll workers on the ground?
It's hard, and we know it's hard, and we've really been hammering at this for a long time. And it's like I said, it's a frustrating thing, because if you look at it, Floyd had a perfect June election. There were zero problems. And then they get the small, easy election. And I talked to the elections director that day, and, he had 25 emergency ballots, but he only printed off. He didn't make them precinct based. And then, what did happen exactly? Oh, yeah.
So there was a poll. I
remember the poll cards. Some of them, 10% probably or so, were probably programmed properly. And best as we can figure, whoever coded those was just going too quick pulling them out, and they didn't test them. LNA should have caught those things, and they probably used those 10% they did first, and they were fine. So you don't LNA every single poll card. You LNA every machine. So we're telling them now, it's a practice, test all of your poll worker cards. So yeah. And that was what the problem was, and it wasn't a software error, because when they brought them all back to reprogram, guess what? They all worked. So, and he was focusing on the wrong things. But I think part of the issue you have, and this is what happened in June too, when things didn't start out smooth, you had inexperienced poll workers freeze. And we're trying to do everything we can to take away the stresses of those things, knowing that in a state with 159 counties, with different skill levels and different levels of voting and different kind of polling locations. I mean, take example of Lumpkin County. They have one polling location. They have 22,000 people there. It works. They figured out how it works for their community, and it works great. We had Park Tavern. It was a complete nightmare. because they had 300. They were one of the fastest processing polling locations in the state. They were doing 160 people an hour. But when you start with 350 people in line, you're doing 160 an hour. What's going to happen on that math problem I was talking about? You're never going to catch up. So that's why it's important to have more polling locations and better trained poll workers.
Aklima,
Yes, and yes, I worked at Park Tavern doing election protection work. And one of the things that kept coming up is, yes, people running out of paper, not having that available to them. But when they first started up the machines, a lot of the poll workers were saying how the machines blew out the circuitry to the building and that they were having issues with getting tech help there. Do we have a plan to have more tech help available and deployed quickly whenever folks are experiencing these machine issues?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're having a tech in every polling location. And the other thing is, every polling location has been inspected. I think Park Tavern was a last minute one, so it didn't get the inspection like we sent inspectors, the state did, to all 2,680, I think, or so locations, and gave those reports to the counties. The UPSs are there in part to protect those kind of things. But if you overload a circuit, there's a specific thing saying you can plug in this many things into a single circuit, and that's part of the logistics issues that we saw there. But they've turned them around relatively quickly. I mean, logistics can be many things. It can be the paper ballots that Anna was talking about. It can be, I forgot power cords. Who knew? Mm-hmm. And it can be, in Gwinnett, they literally, the day before, they said, oh, we can only get 4 precincts on a truck where we used to get 8. We're like, you've had this equipment for a very long time now. It's bigger. And they didn't figure it out. So they were delivering stuff like at 9 o'clock on election day, but they've learned from a lot of those lessons, and they've become cautionary tales. When you have things mess up, you learn more from failures than you do from successes. There's a small part of me that says, I'm kind of glad we had hiccups and problems in June, so people understood the seriousness of the issues we're going to have when 3 times as many people show up in person on election day in November. So they understand what can happen if you don't have your poll workers prepared, if you don't put the processes in place that A, the law says you're supposed to do, B, the rules say you're supposed to do, and C, common sense and customer service says you're supposed to do.
So are we ready? I mean, because this is going to be a real stress test on our system. Are we ready, Gabe?
I'm not going to say we're ready yet. No, we have a lot more training to do. We've just started getting these poll workers in. We got to train them up. Fulton is still adding locations. They literally added 18 in an election board meeting yesterday. A lot of the counties are ready. And let me say this, election workers are friggin' heroes. They still have to show up at work every day during COVID. And this is true for the big counties. This is true for the small counties. I mean, like I said, there's one county where literally their elections director is a part-time worker who works 24 hours because the county does not have enough money to pay her benefits. And she's running an election for that county. And she still shows up to work in COVID every day to do her stuff. I mean, we have people who spend long hours, and they're the ones who are, when I was saying the tone, I more meant we're sort of the brain section, but they actually do the work. They're on the ground. They're looking at voters. They're processing these things. We just got to set the rules and say.
And we're going to wait on Gabe for just a second.
We're giving them everything they've asked for, equipment, PPE. We're getting even more PPE out. So we're giving them everything they can possibly ask for. In fact, when we were buying the equipment, we gave them all the way up through May, said, any other equipment you want to buy, let's buy it now. And we ordered a lot more scanners and BMDs and poll pads and sent them out. So we're trying to give them everything that they need and are asking for. And we literally, on the call we have with Fulton County today, is what else can we do for you? What else can we do? And they're running out of things to ask for in many parts.
Well, speaking of funding, you mentioned funding before. CARES funding. We know that this is something that counties can now request funding for critical election work that they have to do. Have you seen a lot of counties request the funding? And has the Secretary of State been very open with counties to request, to put in their applications for the grant funding? Has that been something?
There's 2 separate sets of CARES money. There's CARES money that comes in through the counties. That's directly from the feds to the counties, and they can do stuff with that. We had another bucket of CARES money, about $10.8 million. Just so you know, the entire absentee ballot program costs a little over $9 million. So we used another section of that. We set up established agreements for them to buy PPE and drop boxes. In fact, we just reopened the drop box one again to allow them to do that. And we now have 2 outside groups that are willing to potentially pay for drop boxes. We're vetting them now and trying to put together a plan. But again, drop boxes are not a panacea because they require a lot of work to be handled. And in a metro county, we have the resources and personnel, but in some of these smaller counties, they do not. So just mandating they have one makes their lives more difficult for the actual election processing they have to do, which is why we leave a lot of these sort of decision makings at the county level. And like I said, we don't see problems in most of these places, mainly because the volume is smaller. And the thing that's really important is you have election workers there who know their friends and neighbors, who care and want to make it work quickly. In June, as y'all famously all heard, Fulton was hiring people on the Saturday, Sunday, and Monday beforehand who you cannot possibly train in 3 days to be a poll worker. It's impossible. So we've been working with them. We're working with the C-suite, Dick Anderson, their county manager. It's kind of like taking the wheel on this one. And Bridget over there is doing a great job. And they're kind of really making sure that they're thinking all this stuff through and handling it better than they did the last time.
Well, and if anybody has any other questions, I don't want to waste an opportunity, but we are at 7 o'clock. Aklima, you still got some questions?
Just have a quick sentence, I promise.
Yeah, sure.
Which one of us has done trial law?
Right.
Look, this is an opportunity. You know, Gabe is graciously offered to be here to answer these questions, so definitely don't miss your opportunity if you have questions.
Yes,
and I've not felt like a pinata, so I appreciate that.
We
don't want you to feel like a pinata.
It's okay. He's used to it.
But we all want to work. We want elections to work for everybody, and so we want to work with the Secretary of State's office wherever possible to help make that happen. So we definitely don't want you feeling like a pinata.
100%, and I don't feel
You got
comfortable.
it. You know, what's your one sentence?
my one sentence is. Absolutely agree. Drop boxes are not the catch-all. They're not the panacea. They're not the ultimate solution. But I do think that they are an important step, and mandating them mandate plus instruction plus support would probably be really useful and helpful, especially in those smaller rural communities who may need some of that additional guidance to help the voters in those communities. So
it's going to be really hard to mandate for the small communities. They don't have the resources. We don't have the resources to give them for personnel and stuff. In fact, we changed the rule. It used to be you have to empty them every day. And we had some of these counties say, look, I think I get 2 people in a car driving around, gas mileage and everything. That's the level they have to worry about. And that's what we have to keep in mind, that every county is different. And take Eccles County. They have 3,000 voters. Their use of a drop box would be really next to pointless because everybody knows where the elections office is in the county office. And that can be, we got to remember, for 20 years, you can always drop off your absentee ballot at the elections office, regardless of a drop box.
But a drop box outside the front door of the elections office could help people who are worried about COVID so that they don't have to interact with people. And then you don't have someone driving around. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue that point. What we've said is put a mail slot, and some people have done that at their county office. But then remember, we also say it has to be monitored 24 hours a day. So they have to get a camera. And my best suggestion is get one of those deer cameras where you can put it up on a tree. When there's motion, it captures the stuff. Just put it in a way that nobody can steal it. So that's the other part. But that's a $70 solution. And that was put on Firefly by our friends from Bartow County and said, this is a way to do this, and still follow the rule and get the things done. Our elections directors are creative. They want it to work. We want it to work for everybody. In this role, I could give a rat's ass who wins an election. All I want to do is make sure everybody who wants to vote can be registered to vote and vote in the way that they so choose. I mean, the RAND Corporation said the state of Georgia was one of the #1 for being prepared for a pandemic, oddly enough, for people read the media reports. We also have 3 weeks of early voting, online voter registration, automated voter registration. We're about to do an eligible but unregistered mailing. We are setting up this portal. We are literally trying to throw everything we can to make sure that November is successful.
Well,
Thank you.
This has been a really great discussion, and of course, I'm gonna, as a journalist, as a publisher, I'm definitely gonna do my part, as I've always done, to remind people to please go vote. Please take steps to make sure that your vote is processed and counted. I know the people on this panel all have a similar job and role to play. The election is November 3rd. If you live under a rock and haven't heard that yet, the election is November 3rd. We hope you will all vote in it. And we hope that each of you will consider joining us again. This has been a tremendously informative panel. I've learned a lot more in this 1 hour than I've probably learned in a couple of years covering elections. So I appreciate you all being so gracious with your time and joining us. This is the Decaturish.com Twitch show. We tape every Wednesday and Friday at 6 p.m. I do not know what the hell we're going to be talking about next week. We will figure it out. There's always something going on. But until then, all of you, please have a nice weekend. Please circle November 3rd on your calendar and do the things that you need to do to vote in this election, because it's important. Okay, take care, everyone. See y'all again soon.
Thanks. Stay safe.